Asked to unmute.
Hi, Mitesh.
Hello, sir. Morning.
Nice background.
Welcome, Dr. Sujit. So now I officially start our today's third webinar of Indian Society of Pain Clinicians Online Gurukul. Today's webinar is about trigeminal neuralgia, and I welcome you all in the webinar, which is going to be presented by Professor Virendra Mohan sir from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He has got an extensive experience on the different treatment modalities of trigeminal neuralgia. So this meeting is going to be a wonderful pool of knowledge for all of us. I would like to say a word about this initiative. Indian Society of Pain Clinicians has come up with a unique educational initiative for all the pain physicians practicing or getting prepared in different fellowships, DM courses, PDF, PDCC across the country and the world. Also, it is going to make aware about the scope of pain medicine to our residents of anesthesiology to help them, to enable them making good choices in their career. So,
अभी आए पैसे तो फिर देखेंगे.
hello, please mute yourself. Hello,
Hello, sir.
please mute everybody. So, I hope that this meeting is going to be a very good for all of us, and we, Indian Society of Pain Clinicians, is specifically thankful to our founder, President Professor Virendra Rastogi sir, past President Professor Anil Agarwal sir, current President Professor Deepak Thapa sir, and today's speaker Professor Mohan, who is also the President-elect of Indian Society of Pain Clinicians. So with these words, I request all of you, please to mute yourself to minimize the disturbance. Secondly, I will also request you all to put any query in the chat room, chat box. We will take them after the presentation by Professor Mohan sir. With these words, I humbly request Professor Virendra Mohan sir to kindly take over the stage and share his screen for the benefit of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adinath, for nice words. And hello, everybody.
Yes,
I will be deliberating about terminology.
Yes, sir. So kindly share your screen.
These are the few videos of patient presenting in a clinic with orofacial pain. As you can see, that this is constantly patient has a lot of pain while talking.
करंट से एक लेयर में आया करंट आगे चला गया.
Similarly, this patient is explaining how he's having attacks of terminology.
एक लाइन में आता है
And
ज़्यादा
onset duration,
ज़्यादा 5 सेकंड जो बीच में जो पीरियड है वो पेन फ्री रहता है. और क्या है? जैसे
this is the presentation the patient may have of terminology. As you already know that one of the most painful condition known to the mankind, and is characterized by sudden, usually unilateral, severe, brief, stabbing, recurrent pain in distribution of one or more branches of fifth cranial nerve. And the problem is that often misdiagnosed as tooth problem. Most of the patients which visit our OPD or pain clinic, they have a history of extraction of tooth, mostly. Overall, the incidences are around 12.6 to 27 per lakh population. Incidence increases with increasing age. And the problem, this trigeminal is very physically and mentally incapacitating the patient. And sometimes the patient may starve, may stop doing the work which trigger the pain, and even they start into and sometimes the patient may have suicidal tendency. Such type of severe pain the patient experience. So coming to anatomy, you can see that there are three sensory nuclei. They form trigeminal nerve. Similarly, there is a motor nucleus of trigeminal nerve that forms the motor branch of trigeminal nerve. As you can see, this motor nerve traverses along the beneath the sensory nerve root and joins the mandible branch just before the exit of mandibular nerve from the foramen ovale. Similarly, this sensory root they joins together and divided into ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular branches. So, coming to relative anatomy, as you can see, it's a Meckel's. This trigeminal ganglion lies in the Meckel's cave. It's a concentric shape, and medially you can see that lies the internal carotid artery and cavernous sinus, and anteriorly there's three branches, and you can see that if you go up, there is few other cranial nerves like abducens, oculomotor, intraocular nerve. So one has to be careful while intervening and going further up with channels of paresis of these nerves. Coming to epidemiology, it's usually found in middle-aged patients. Usually females have predominance, and mostly unilateral, but left side has predominance. And sometimes, especially in multiple sclerosis, you can have bilateral presentation. And among this, V2, V3 have 42% of the incidence. Coming to pathogenesis, the exact pathophysiology remains speculative. Some states vessel compression. What happens in mechanically twisted nerve fibers and secondary demyelination occur. Basically, this is mediated by microvascular ischemic damages that lowers the excitable threshold of the affected fibers and promote post-op between adjacent fibers. That is ignition hypothesis. Similarly, demyelination leads to impairment of nociceptive symptom. If tactile signals coming from fast myelinated, that is A beta fibers, can directly activate the slow nociceptive A delta fibers and sometimes the C fibers. And what happens is result in high frequency discharges. That is characteristic of trigeminal. And sometimes, in some cases, MS blocks and lacunar infarct can be found in these patients. And coming to nerve compression, then there is a trigeminal calcium projection. What happens? There is a continuous recurrent nociceptive from the head and neck coverage of the spinal trigeminal nucleus, and that decreases the threshold of adjacent second degree neuron from nociceptive stimulus. Similarly, vibration frequency of structure close to the TN match with it. That is like carotid artery or venous veins. Then the trigeminal starts resonating. There is a damage to trigeminal now, and there is a abnormal transmission. The patient can experience pitch injury. Similarly, there is the ignition theory, as I already told you. There is injury of trigeminal afferent neurons in the trigeminal root or ganglion. And what happens is to make these axons hyperexcitable, and the patient may experience pain corruption. Coming to clinical presentation, usually the patient himself will volunteer to discuss symptomatology. They themselves will explain, or basically it becomes ascertaining that they start telling the story of their pain and pain problem. And some patients may need some prompting for descriptive terms, and most of the time some will correlate with some acoustic or other equivalents. But the key is that clinical history is very important. One should take proper clinical history. Now coming to, usually there is a history of striving pain related to other types of pains. Some may have constant discomfort. There may be history of some ablative procedure for relief of pain. And usually because of fear of speaking, this may present with some non-verbal behavior. And sometimes the patient may wince or interrupt the speech. He may cover the affected part with a cloth, and may use some wet cloth at the affected site. Some may tell even the crude breeze across the face can cause the attack. Now coming to clinical presence, we describe the character, site, radiation, severity, onset, provoking factors, relevant factors. Usually the pain is sharp, shooting, stabbing, electric shock, and lightning, and unbearable. Mostly the patient usually complained of electric shock type of features. Site is usually unilateral, and distribution of trigeminal nerve is always there. And right side is usually predominant, that's 61%. And V2 and V3 have around 17%. Now coming to trigger, most of the patient may have trigger areas like nose, lips, eyes, ear, inside mouth. Usually, if patient started the investigation, usually 73% of patient have onset of pain, onset of spot. And touch, especially toothbrushing, eating, shaving, talking, a cold wind on faces, that may present 50%. But trigger is always present more than 90% of the patient. Onset is usually paroxysmal. There is abrupt onset and termination. The patient in between the onset attack, between two attacks will have pain period. And usually the patient always remembers the first pain attack he experienced. And there is always a period of remission between the attacks. Now, this is a progression of terminal over time. Early in the disease, the period of exposure are less, but period of remissions are less. Gradually, later in the disease course, only period of exposure predominates. Now, just to look, inebriate certain provoking factor, I already told, light touch of tooth commission light. And usually relief at rest, local anesthetics, pharmacotherapy, remission, and intervention. The severity of these attacks, so this pain is so that the patient is always afraid of doing things which trigger the pain. And as I already described, that they usually start going to pain trigger, avoid shaving, brushing, they have poor hygiene, they are unable to, they are reluctant to toothbrush, and even the severity is such that the patient may develop. There are various classifications for last so many years, but recently in International Headache Society has described in association with International Association Study of Pain, and they have come out a new classification that is in 2018. And in this they described it's a disorder that probably recurrent unilateral being electric shock like pain, which is abrupt in onset and termination and is limited to distribution of one or more trigeminal, and it's usually triggered by innocuous stimuli. And it may develop without apparent cause or result of another diagnosed disorder. Additionally, there may be concomitant continuous pain of moderate intensity within the distribution of the affected nerve. Similarly, they have put forward a new criteria for trigeminal neuralgia, that is IHS 2018. That is a recurrent problem I have told you, the lasting of fraction of a second to 2 minutes, severe intensity, electric shock like, then expressive by innocuous with the affected trigeminal distribution, and not better accounted by another ICHD diagnosis. Similarly, they have put forward in three main goals, like classical neuralgia. They further subdivided into two. That is, one is purely paroxysmal, one is paroxysmal with concomitant continuation. Similarly, secondary neuralgia, usually they have clubbed multiple sclerosis, space lesion, and the pain which is related to other causes in secondary neuralgia. Similarly, they have classified idiopathic neuralgia. I will come dive on it briefly. And they have clubbed a group of patients in painful trigeminal neuropathic pain, that is especially in those patients which have history of herpes zoster, like post-herpetic neuralgia, persistent post-traumatic trigeminal neuropathy, and the pain attributed to other disorders or idiopathic traumatic trigeminal neuropathy. Now, coming to classical, they have described that is trigeminal developing with apparent cause, then neurovascular compression. The patient will have recurrent fall and demonstration arise during surgery or nerve compression or with morphological. That is very important. Simply having arterio vein near the nerve doesn't comprise that is compression. There should be some morphological changes, that is a distortion of atrophy of the trigeminal root near the root entry zone level. Similarly, there is a secondary trigeminal neuralgia which describes multiple sclerosis or MS plaque at trigeminal neuralgia. It should fulfill all the criteria of trigeminal neuralgia. Similarly, secondary trigeminal neuralgia attributed to specific like they have clubbed in different way. And secondary trigeminal neuralgia attributed to other cause other than MS plaque, MS and MS plaque, they have clubbed in this patient. Usually, diagnostic criteria is recurrent proximal urinary patient pain, fulfilling the trigeminal neuralgia with purely proximal ulcer with coming, but not necessarily unilateral. The patient may present with bilateral symptoms also. And a disorder other than those described, like MS, compression, should not be the cause. A pain has developed after onset of disorder and led to recovery. Similarly, they have clubbed with idiopathic trigeminal neuralgia. In this, they have described the trigeminal neuralgia with neither electrophysiological test nor MRI showing any significant abnormality. They have clubbed especially idiopathic trigeminal neuralgia. And they have subdivided these into like idiopathic trigeminal neuralgia that is purely paroxysmal, or idiopathic trigeminal neuralgia with concomitant continuous pain. The patient is having, apart from having paroxysm, the patient may tell you that he is having concomitant continuous pain. Then I will just go through that painful trigeminal neuropathy. They have described that primary pain usually continuous and near continuous and only describe burning or squeezing. Rather than a sharp electric shock type of pain, the patient may complain that he is in burning or squeezing or pins or needle. And this is diagnostic criteria is same, that the patient is commission painful trigeminal neuropathy with subtypes of trigeminal neuralgia. And usually the classical presentation of these patients is burning, squeezing, and the patient with the pins and needles are. And they have mentioned in diagnostic criteria the clinically detectable sensory deficit within the trigeminal distribution, mechanical, and that is very important. Cold hyperalgesia, these are very common in these patients. As a rule, the allodynia regions are much larger than the punctate trigger zone presentation. One should not confuse that these with trigger zone or trigger areas, but these areas are very large compared to punctate trigger zone. Similarly, unilateral facial pain 3 months attributed to herpes zoster described, and they usually following herpetic infection or some other varicella zoster virus that cerebral spinal fluid, and they have clubbed with this patient with painful trigeminal neuropathy attributed to herpes zoster. Similarly, trigeminal post-herpetic neuralgia, which we have seen a number of times, and the patient with a history of herpes before. And another, they have diagnosed, they have given it painful post-traumatic trigeminal neuropathy. Usually the patient, previously these were clubbed in anesthesia dolorosa, and description is described as unilateral bilateral facial or oral pain following and caused by trauma. History of trauma to the trigeminal nerve is very important, with other symptoms and signs of trigeminal nerve dysfunction. Similarly, painful trigeminal neuropathy attributed to other disorders.
Volume వస్తలేదు ఎందుకు నాన్న?
Now there is a described clinical criteria also, like type 1, type 2. Type 1 they club classical and typical. and type 2 idiopathic. And most time the type 1 may progress to type 2, and these chances of structural abnormality. And unfortunately, this classification does not list symptomatic, but it's fortunate that International Headache Society has come up with a new classification. It doesn't include any symptomatic, and they have described a different way, like classical, secondary, and idiopathic. And there is another recommendation as far as the classification that come up by Giorgio Croce in Association of American Academy of Neurology, that this is the flow chart. If the patient have facial pain, yes. Is the pain distributing in the facial or internal timing territory? If no, is unlikely timing neuralgia. If yes, there is a possibility of, and they are termed as a possible neuropathic pain. Then pain triggered by typical maneuvers, yes, classically established probable neuropathic pain. Then investigation, diagnostic test confirming lesion or disease that pain. That means yes, it's established timing. It's a definitive neurology. If MRI is showing some vascular compression, classical neuralgia. If MRI diagnostic demonstrate major muscular disorder, it's a secondary. But it's though it's a nice though, but we should follow the International Headache Society diagnostic criteria only. And investigation, before investigation, I have to stress that diagnosis mostly based on clear history. Taking proper clinical history is very important. And if then one can elicit zone of hypothesia, that is good. Otherwise, and usually the patient require, if there is red flag, like to identify craniofacial symptom or to identify non-cognitive schizophrenia. And now that the recommendation is that one should go for MRI brain to rule out any neurovascular compression in all the patients. Now coming to MRI, MRI is very good tool to demonstrate neurovascular compression with morphological changes. But as I already told you, the context should only meet diagnostic criteria. And this compression of REZ increase sensitivity and degree of compression, as I told you, is theoretically relevant. Like if there is flattening, distortion, dislocation, or atrophy of the arm, then that's very important. And it's very sensitive to detect pathological process involving venous and cranial nerve running through the base of skull. And it's an investigation of choice for trigeminal nerve and root. And nowadays they are doing advanced MRI imaging, like 3D MRI, like conservative imaging, study state. And in those they are able to detect the atrophy, compression, distortion, dislocation, atrophy very well. It's an sensitivity and specificity of this investigation is very high. One can do MRI angiography also. Now these are a few pictures that show that MRI constituting. You can see that these are the nerves. This is a cone that nerve is actually from the cone and moving towards the porous trigemini. You can see that both the nerves are normal. They are on normal side. Here in second picture, you can see that this side nerve is slightly less, it is slightly thin than compared to, and there is, you can see that this, you can call it distortion or atrophy. Similarly, in this picture, you can see that this side of nerve is okay. There is no, and here you can see the vessel, and there is distortion. It's displacing the nerve towards the one side. If these are pathological, this is pathological, this is normal. Now, sometimes you may have to go for neurophysiological test, and like patient with sensory deficit can be go, and you can find that no, it's a very good sensitivity specificity. Coming to differential diagnosis, one has to be careful that sometimes that patient may cause headache, but duration is usually the hallmark is 20 minutes rather than few seconds to minute, and it's usually retroborough, cheek and chin, and only supervised deep bundle. Similarly, tongue, CPA, syndrome, that post which has been included in the diagnostic according to International Headache Society. And giant cell at usually that forehead and neck temple, this patient may present with pain. Unlikely, one can miss the diagnosis of trigeminal because the classical history is there always there in patient with trigeminal. Now, coming to management, pharmacotherapy is the hallmark of the backbone of the management of trigeminal. And if a patient has not responding conservative therapy or don't wish to continue pharmacotherapy, one can go for intervention procedure like if there is intractable pain, intolerant, or failure to place procedure. And there is always question. This question was raised by Blank way back. They said if trigeminal is a progressive disease, why not do intervention early? But still, the recommendation is that one should go for pharmacotherapy first. And if this is like, especially if the patient, young patient, one was like young patient down with neurovascular complication, it's always better to go for some intervention like vascular decompression. This is another flow chart that shows the management. That shows that if the facial pain, zone, trigger zone, unilateral, no, yes, MRI is normal, then go for pharmacotherapy. Pain if is good, decrease slowly, recurrent pain decrease slowly. If there is a no MRI is not normal, lesion, demyelinating plaque, vascular abnormality, then always look for intervention, neurology concern. Similarly, if patient is not tolerating this pharmacotherapy, then surgical treatment is always indicated. And this is another flow chart that shows that resistant to medical treatment, if there is medical compression, already with common condition, one can go for percutaneous intervention. Similarly, the patient is young adult or healthy elderly, one can go for this patient, this intervention, percutaneous. And the recommendation is that if patient is young and having compression, neurovascular compression, always go for posterior for intended microvascular depression. Okay. And even in healthy patient, little patient, that if patient 60 years, 55 years, it's not candidate to subject this patient for microvascular depression. But in Indian setup, in our setup, usually the patient are reluctant to go for surgical. They think it's very major procedure. They always fear of risk of neurosurgery and all that. They usually avoid going for any neurosurgical intervention. Now coming to pharmacotherapy, the carbamazepine is the gold standard for pharmacotherapy treatment. Usually start with the 300 to may go up to 1200 milligram per day. And similarly, oxycarbazepine can be used. Baclofen, the patient is responding to these drugs, you can add some baclofen, amitriptyline, and gabapentin can be used, and pregabalin can be used. So I will focus on interventional part only. And coming to interventional procedure, there may be non-ablative procedure like microvascular decompression, and it's the only procedure that deals with the posterior etiology, that is neurovascular intervention. And in fact, the results are very good in terms of pain relief and complication. And ablative procedure can be one of the procedure is gamma knife, that is reduced surgery. It's a popular, little less literature, and can be found daycare basis. Cost is the problem, and mostly it's available in limited centers. So that's the biggest limitation technique. And another drawback of this procedure is latency period, which may range from 4 to 12. That means that after procedure, the patient may experience pain relief, start experiencing pain relief after 4 to 6. Takes months together, the patient can experience pain relief. That's it. And another problem that especially pain patient, that's in our, not in our domain, that's usually done by university. And our focus is particularly transformer techniques. We'll come to that. What is the indication of this? The patient is unwilling for surgical procedure, lack of infrastructure, unavailability of skilled personnel, cost, as I told you. And the beauty is this, it can be utilized in cases of failed procedure, poor patient sample. Now, coming to another, we go for different opportunities. I just try to elaborate some anatomical observation, especially we have to insert the needle in the brain, and one should be aware of what structure lies at the target area, near the target area. That you can see the Meckel scale lies the triangle. As you can see, the medially internal carotid artery and the cavernous sinus there. Then if you go anterolaterally, that three branches emerging, and superiorly there is a temporal lobe, and if you wander laterally, there is a number of cranial nerves which can be injured if you are not appropriately or not accurately place the needle. Especially coming to needle position, especially if you are contemplating to do RF lasering, the needle positioning is very important. As you can see that the nerve fibers are arranged somatotrophically. Top, first division, in between, second division, and third division. This is the area we have to target. In fluoroscopy term, usually we insert the needle and we take care that it should not cross this line with the cella. We draw a straight line here. This is the clivus. This is the petus part of temporal one. The needle chip should not breach this. If only in those cases where we are planning to do ophthalmic division of which we rarely do. Otherwise, it should be below this line. 5 millimeter if we are planning for ophthalmic division, 10 millimeter, that is 1 centimeter, that is planning to do maxillary, and 15 millimeter if you are planning to do mandibular division. For any purpose, oval technique, we employ Hartel technique. Hartel technique, that is usually described by Hartel. It's an analytical landmark technique. In this patient position is spine with neck position. And coming to point of entry, we mark 3 points. One is just lateral, 2.5 lateral to the external mouth opening, midpoint of pupil, and 2.5 centimeter anterior to the external auditometers. Or sometimes you can take that if you mandibular, you can midpoint of this can be used. The caution has to be taken for oral mucosa. While inserting needle, especially within the mouth cavity, we have to put a finger so that there is no breach of oral mucosa. That is very important. But if you insert same needle to the trigeminal, which has the meningitis, and direction, depth direction technique has to be used for every few centimeter insertion of needle. One should take different types of fluoroscope use, and fluoroscope guidance is always very important. Though people in past have done it blindly, but nowadays the fluoroscope guidance is a must. Now coming to percutaneous retrogression glycosylrhythmia, it's a very simple technique, reduced cost. Fortunately, very few centers are doing that. Similar Hartel technique is used. A needle is then inserted into the middle of the foramen. Once needle is proper position, remove the slit, see of egress of the. And once egress is there, reposition the needle slit and confirm the position by injecting dye in same sitting position. The aim is to fill the cisternal And usually the volume system is around maybe not more than 2.5 ml. And we inject the glycerol according to the which type of bra, like if you are planning to do ophthalmic or mandibular or mandibular maxillary or all the nerve, then maximum one can use is the volume of dye, a volume of that's in the system. Usually it's a 2.5. If you are trying to do say ophthalmic division, only remove partial 1/3 of the dye and inject the glycerol. Similarly, if planning to do all the nerves, then you can inject full volume like to 2 ml or 2.5 ml. And after injection, one has to keep the patient in semi-recumbent position for 2 hours. That is very important. It's a bit cumbersome, and most of the centers are not doing this procedure nowadays. But these results are very good. Like complete pain relief in 90% patients and 77% pain relief for 10 years. The average is around 2 to 3 years. But problem is that mostly patient up to 48% can have facial sensibility, and around 2 to 20% patient have dysesthesia. Anesthesia may be there. The vasovagal response is always a problem in percutaneous oral intervention. And patient can have septic meningitis, herpes simplex. If the patient has herpes simplex, that's when the patient will have good pain relief. Now coming to one of the most commonly used intervention is radiofrequency thermoablation. Same technique, Hartree technique is used, patient posing accordingly. And once the patient is posing, and if you are doing abdominal landmark insertion or using fluoroscope, fully fluoroscope guided, technique can be used. And once the needle is inserted, you always take 2 views. One is lateral view, one is like in this lateral view, you can see the needle tip entering the foramen ovale. And as I told you, this is which I draw a line from this pituitary fossa to this area. So this is the area we are planning for mandibular, then maxillary. One should not breach this line. This line. Once you have inserted needle, and always do motor stimulation towards. In fact, if motor contraction shows, that is because of motor branch of mandibular nerve, that usually signifies that we have passed the foramen ovale, and the tip is in retrogressive. That's very important. And one can do sensory stimulation, starting with the 50 to 100 hertz, and one can locate the target area like mandibular, maxillary, and the patient will usually say that you will say that tingling or paresthesia is coming in the affected area. And some people don't use any sedation, but if at all you have to use sedation, it is not cooperating. It's because it's very painful here. Always use some sedation, and extent of sedation should be such that at the time of stimulation, patient should be able to tell you that the patient has some sensation. One can check the impedance. Usually impedance is 150, 350 ohms. And this is before starting RF, inject local answer. This is a very controversial topic, though I do use 0.1 to 0.1 ml in my clinical practice because it's very painful procedure. In my clinical, I use only 0.1 to 0.3, and most times using 0.1 or 0.2 ml will have a complete freedom of the patient, and the patient we can subject the patient to a effective RF lesion. Recommendation of RF, you can start with 60 seconds or 60 to 65 at first, and check the pain sensation after lesioning in affected area and normal side. They should be always different. And after each lesion, it's always better to use check corneal sensation after each lesion because we are afraid of lesioning of the ophthalmic lesion. And for second lesioning, one go of 60 seconds, 65 degrees. Similarly, for third lesioning, 60 seconds or 70, and some have recommended you can go up to 75 degrees also. What happens if doing radiofrequency thermocoagulation? Basically, it's selectively injure unmyelinated and thinly. And the goal is to produce mild hypostasia and distribution primal nerve. And this usually the complete failure is 93 to 99%. And recurrence rate is around 20 to 44 years. But as with any perforate oval procedure, the patient will have significant dysesthesia and sensory loss can occur in up to 6 to 20% of patient. And motor weakness is always around 14 to 14%. And if you have injured the ophthalmic division, that the chance of loss of corneal infection is 2%. Anesthesia dolorosa, if we have completely coagulate, it's very rare, it's 0.5 to 1.6%. Now coming to percutaneous microagulation. Just one question, how is it different from other percutaneous procedure? Is it not the same ability procedure? Are the complications or less? Is the duration different from other procedure? How different? Usually, mostly these patients are done under general anesthesia, and patient in general anesthesia is always cooperative. It's not a problem. Okay. Another problem is the lesion. Rising other ablative procedure, there is no control. You will ablate the say pain fibers, sensory touch fibers, or say 8 beta and 8 delta C fiber. There is no control of this. But in this procedure, the histological studies found that it says spared, and like the C fibers and 8 delta fibers are spared relatively. So it's a selective sparing of pain fibers which take the pain to the brain. And it injures the sensory fiber like the A beta fibers, which takes the touch sensation. And as I told you, it's in clinical, usually the patient have trigger. That trigger is go by that A beta fiber. That means we are abolishing that trigger. And you are not, though there is always chances of even A delta and C fibers, there is less compared to other ablative procedure. Coming to complication as such, very difficult to say, but corneal sensation, usually they say it is corneal sensation, it's spared, and so one of the best procedure if the patient is having involvement of all three nerves, V1, V2, V3, that's the best procedure. Regarding duration, duration is usually range from 1 to 3 years, 4 years, and recurrence rate of 22, 45%. In all, we have done study and we found that the beauty of this procedure is that the patient will come back to you after 3 years or 4 years or even 3 years, and they will opt for same procedure. They will not opt for any other procedure. This is very good. And most time the patient is complete pain relief. And unfortunately, this is not used so frequently, underutilized procedure because of some reasons, availability of resources and all that. Now coming to a bit about this procedure itself, it's introduced by Muller and Licher in 1983, and it's called mechanical ganglion. Mostly, I told you, myelinated fiber, and usually it's performed with GA, but there's some report with Gordon injecting local anesthetic before balloon compression. Usually, the patient is supine position and extension. One locate the transformer will described by Hertel, and a 14 gauge needle, a forgot, is used, which will subsequently used to insert the forgot And once balloon is properly positioned, then it's inflated for 60 to 20 seconds, though they report that they are done for 1 second. But usually its balloon is inflated for 60 to 1 seconds. And in our study we use 120 seconds. You can see this picture, it's submental view. You can see the mandibular, you can see the spine arch, you can see the area between maxilla and mandibular, you can see the ablution. That is foraminal. You can
Please mute yourself. Everybody is requested to mute yourself.
see that needle entering the. And one of the special precaution one has to take while using this procedure is the aim is not to enter the foramen ovale. The needle tip should be at the mouth of the foramen ovale. It's a very big needle, and that will injure the nerve.
So Mohan sir, just a moment. I am muting all. I am muting all. There are some disturbances coming from. And then you please unmute yourself.
Pardon?
I am
Unmute.
muting everybody. Just a moment, and then I will unmute you. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please go. Sorry for the glitch.
This is the fluoroscope view of lateral approach. You can see that fossa. You can see that needle tip is just at the mouth of the foramen ovale. Not gone beyond. Now this is another picture, that submental view, that same picture. If you are very good in, one can use this view, that is the AP view, and what the aim is to bring this vitreous part within the orbital field, near the inferior vertebrae. As you see in medial, there is a slight sudden dip in this area. This denotes Meckel's cave. And they have used, especially neurosurgeons have used this as a, suppose they have to compress mandibular, they will keep this laterally, both the nerve medially and this mandibular, this is for ophthalmic. Usually they keep this needle tip at this area, but this is not required, it's not mandatory to do this. They claim, but neurosurgeon claim that you can be selective in compressing the various divisions. Now coming, once you inflate the balloon, the patient, the image of inflated balloon should be like a pear-shaped balloon. If pear-shaped, that means compression is between the dura and the porus trigeminal. If a dumb shape like that, means you have overinflated the balloon and you should decrease the volume. And sometimes the inflation is like the rounded side. That sometimes because due to the volume of that area, that is not. So you can use slightly more, but ideal shape should be pear shape. Now coming to this, usually the effect occurs mostly immediate within a week, and we have found, and the studies have found that total if is 92 to 100%. And one of the problem with this is may associated with mild sensory loss 70%, but it's very transient. Usually the mild sensory loss disappears within 3 months, and one of the complication is with muscle weakness, that is masseter weakness, and ocular symptoms rare. Dysesthesia may be present, anesthesia dolorosa also in this type of, and loss of corneal reflex. It's spare the, so corneal reflex do occur in 1.5%. It's very rare. Now coming to Meckelin changes caused by PMC, that balloon compression. As I told you, changes are most significant when tip is located in the porous diaphragm. It's tear shape. As the compression are between balloon surface and interdural wall. And sorry. And elevation and stretching of dura occurs and dural tension may reach medial to lateral abdomen. So overinflation is always a problem and distal to porous diaphragm. That's why there is a compression of the nerve. After withdrawal, the dura cavum turn flaccid. Now coming to recurrences of this PMDC, the recurrences may range from say 5 to 38%. This is another table showing types of problems like mystery face may be present 10.8, but studies found even 70% of the patient may complain of mystery face. Dysphagia, not much. Residual not much. And corneal sensory burn, not much. Now there is a comparison of various percutaneous innovation, like regarding efficacy and technical success. In balloon compression, it's higher rate, up to 99% patient will have good rate. Compared to radiofrequency ablation, it's very high, I think 100%. And glycerol admin very short duration, 85 to 90%. But studies have claimed that effect will last for 4 years. Also. Similarly, complication, facial numbness, is high, both are more or less similar. The anesthesia dolorosa least is in glycerol. Corneal effects mostly in glycerol. Motor deficit mostly in PMDC. In spite of all this problem, we have found that the effect of this is very complete. Patient will have near complete pain relief and have a longer duration of pain relief. Now this is a comparison of different interventions, especially microvascular decompression, rhizotomy, balloon compression. If you can see that rhizotomy has as comparable microvascular decompression in this paper, and neuropathy patient can have with rhizotomy, mortality of severe inspection, then perioperative mortality is high in microvascular decompression. But we found that percutaneous microballoon compression or rhizotomy, even glycerol, is a very effective intervention for relief of pain in terminal intubation. Now coming to some newer technique, neuromodulation used, especially peripheral neuromodulation, by sending a lead to the transmitter we use in past, but we are takers of that. Now, newer neuromodulation technique as well, like motor cortex stimulation. Few studies that claim that 75% pain. Similarly, deep brain stimulation tried in the target is hypothalamus. But in one study that included 4 patients, and they include those patients who are effective conservative treatment. They found that none of the patients had any pain relief in those patients. And in similar study, in the same study rather, a patient with multiple sclerosis had good pain relief. But in none of the patients with refractory, which we say it is a kind of treatment the patient will go, none of the patients had any pain relief. Similarly, there is some modification or advancement in RF electrodes has been tried. That is to improve the efficacy of RF. They have developed a quadrupolar electrode, and for this they have found that they can increase mapping or mapping can be accurately done. And basically, it's a computer system to record and explore verbal response for 34 facial segments compared to standard 3. And stimulation of post-glycerin ganglion fibers, the accuracy of the somatotropic maps allow them to decrease their lesion size to 1.3. Basically, the aim is to selectively lesion the target area. And this considerably reduces unnecessary and unwanted injury, yielding improved outcome, but it's in infancy phase only, not much of has been heard. Similarly, there is a new selective sodium channel blocker has been tried. That's Bixotegnin or Rexategnin, BIBQS. Basically, it's a selective sodium channel blocker. It acts on certain type, that is NaV, sodium 1.7. Sodium voltage dependent 1.7 sodium channel. So this can be used, and they have done only one study there. That's the study. They found that they give around 153 times day, and they found that 30% reduction number of paroxysms related to running period was defined, and there is a reduction of number of by 60% compared to 12%, that is in placebo decrease. And but still, I think more studies are has to be done whether it's effective or not. Now, in Japan or Eastern Asian countries, they are using navigational and tomographic control, and the focus is improving lesional accuracy. And this study do suggest that improved imaging may lead to lower rate of complication, but still very few studies there. And Frawley has reported recurrence algebra site of lesion in the division. And I think it's a emerging technique. More and more studies to make it's effective. Another problem is that most of the setup may not have this type of neuro language control or tomography. Most of center may rely on fluoroscopy. So that's an advanced data that may be done, but not in most of the common center we have. Now coming just to summarize, all techniques are variable results, and no single technique is curable. And in clinical practice, RF thermocouple is still preferred as facility for more advanced procedure, and very effective, cost effective also. Glycerol diazoxide lysis is less effective, and the point spread cannot be controlled, has a very high occurrence, and further POCME because of fibrosis. Another problem with glycerol is that the more you do the procedure, the more the fibrosis, and later on it's very difficult to pass this fibrosis for any other intervention. And balloon compression is very effective, useful for vein also, but problem is totally it's a sensory loss and incidence of water flow is very high. And Anurag?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful and elaborate presentation.
Pardon?
I thank you very much for the elaborate and wonderful presentation. I hope that it must have removed lot of doubts from the audience minds. I would like to take some questions, sir, which audience have posed here.
Before that, can I play one small video clip of
Please,
PMB?
please, sir. Please go ahead. Please go ahead, sir.
This is small video clip while performing balloon compression. I use that standard landmark technique, anatomic landmark. I have marked 3 points. So I will utilize this. So mostly I use total flow control for insertion noodle, just for patient is monitored appropriately. Before using this balloon compression, always you can see that I am using finger to avoid unintentional puncture of the oral mucosa. It's very important. Once you have inserted bypass space between maxilla and mandibular, just take you can see that according to this towards the orbit. Now see, this fluoroscopy shows that my needle tip is just at the mouth of the wound. Now I've started inflating the balloon in continuous flow. You can see that And the important point is this: if you want to keep it infrared for 60 seconds only, that is according to your view. And the important is that once you deflate the balloon, you should remove this system in a total. Both needle and balloon should be. Otherwise, there is chance of fracture of balloon, and that will keep lying in the brain. And another point is that during this inflation, patient may have trigeminal depressor response. A patient may have severe bradycardia also, and in some cases they have reported even asystole. And in Western world, they are using transcutaneous pacing electrode placed. You heard that before inflation. And in few cases, I have also done in high risk patient where I think it's an old patient or that. So I also put transcutaneous pacing before inflation balloon. And bradycardia is always one has to be though. And though it's a sign, the bradycardia is a sign that you have effectively reached the target area. One should not affect bradycardia will happen, but you should be observed and vigilant about the bradycardia and should be able to manage it properly. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is a wonderful video also as the presentation is. Now I would like to take a few questions which the audience have put here. First question is from Dr. Siddharth Verma, our own Joint Secretary of ISPC. That he mentions that Dr. Rastogi, Professor Rastogi sir has made a balloon kit with the name of Rastogi kit. Is it available in India now? I think there is one Swastik pharmacy or companies there who was making these kits. Dr. Sushil can better answer because he was using it regularly. Second question is from Dr. Sanjog.
Yes, please.
Pardon? Who is this?
Please.
Yeah. Second question is from Dr. Sanjog. Any role of neuromodulation in treatment of trigeminal neuralgia? Dr. Viren Mohan sir has already mentioned in his presentation. Dr. Sanjog, sir, would you like to pinch another word?
Do say that previously they used to put peripheral nerve stimulator electrodes through the transdermal vein, but that process has been out of practice and nobody is doing that. But in recent time, newer neuromodulation technique has emerged, like I told you, motor cortex stimulation and deep brain stimulation. But literature is very sparse, though especially for motor cortex, they say it's very effective and they have pain relief in nearly 100% of patients. But literature is very little, very sparse, and it's very difficult to say it may come a long way.
Secondly, it is quite costly therapy also a constraint. Okay. Sir, there is another question for you that if the sensory stimulation is coming at 0.7 to 0.8 volt, do we need to reposition the needle or just increase the temperature up to 80 degrees and go ahead with the lesion?
Just repeat, please, Anurag.
Sir, the question is that if someone is getting sensory stimulation at 0.7 or 0.8 volt, that means higher than the usual less than 0.5 volt, do we need to reposition the needle or we just increase the temperature up to 80 degrees and go ahead with the lesion? What is your suggestion?
That means sensory stimulation is occurring at 0.8
Yes, sir. Yes.
But you have to reposition the needle. So it's always better. There is one clinical always use a bend tip needle. If you bend the needle tip to 10 to 15 degrees, then you can rotate 180 degrees to reach the target area. What happens is we are mostly using straight needle. To reposition needle, even if you rotate the straight needle to 180 or 200 degrees, it won't make any difference. Only difference it will make if you insert needle further or withdraw needle further. But if you bend the needle, say 15 degree or 20 degree, so you can rotate the needle and you can cover the wide area.
Yes, sir. So it's better to reposition the needle and get the stimulation as less than 0.5 volt.
The ideal is 0.4, 0.3. Because we are very near to the neural structure.
Yes, sir. It is not advisable to increase the temperature as it may increase the complications.
A proper lesioning will not occur.
Proper listening. Yes, sir. Thank you. Sir, another question is Dr. Ravi has actually posed a suggestion that evidence of ozone for trigeminal neuralgia. So he has posted one study for benefit of all that they have used uh, ozone for the use of trigeminal. That is the question of discussion. Another question is from Dr. Sanjog, that role of peripheral nerve blocks and peripheral nerve stimulators in the treatment of trigeminal neuralgia.
That depends on setup to setup. Like in India,
Hmm.
most of the time we use the peripheral blocks with, say, diallocaine or even steroid, phenol, alcohol also, even dental surgeon. Therefore, from the problem is that if you do repeated nerve block, the effect is very less. The duration of effect is made 3 to 3 months or 4 months. And more you do the injury to the peripheral nerves, the later on it becomes such a static pain. It will be not amenable to any type of intervention later on. And patient, I have come across 2 patients where dental surgeon, I think repeatedly done around 100 blocks. And
100 blocks.
100 blocks. Patient, I have tried everything. The patient did not do anything, and later I learned that though he is an old man, he committed suicide. He used to come like this. Okay.
That is the unfortunate reason why it has been named suicide disease.
So they say that role of this nerve block, peripheral nerve block, is limited to if you want to do diagnostic. If you want
Only
to
that.
confirm that area of anesthesia patient will experience, so that patient is comfortable, patient know that this, after intervention, I will have this type of facial numbness. The patient to accept this numbness, then in those patients you can contemplate. Or say patient has come, you don't have any time for intervention or day for intervention. In those patients, just to break the pain cycle, one can use for local walk and local anesthetic plus steroids. And later you can
Wonderful,
for intervention.
wonderful explanation, sir. And moreover, when we pain physicians do have the ability and training to reach at the cell here and there. So I hope that Dr. Sanjog must have got his answer. Go to the trigeminal neuralgia and distant ganglion rather than peripheral nerve for the treatment part. So another question is from Sir Dr. Ravi that he has asked about a medicine newly come into the market, eslicarbamazepine. So is there any experience, sir? Would you like to say a word about it?
That I use oxycarbamazepine and carbamazepine. And the current trend, as you know, it's industry-driven work. Drug will come. Otherwise, how many times even people are using carbamazepine? That is the standard treatment they are using for pregnant gabapentin because of industry pressure. So that is new drugs will come, and basically that is the molecule of carbamazepine with less severe effect, side effect. Isn't it?
So another question, yeah, thank you, sir. So it is also a cousin of carbamazepine, which is the baseline drug for the trigeminal neuralgia. So it's okay. Sir, another question is about the balloon compression. That what kind of needle you use before you put up the 14 gauge cannula, or you directly railroad the 14 gauge cannula over the dilatation, or are you using serial dilatation with intermediate gauze cannula? Or second part of this question is that how do you ensure a true AP view in the skull to obtain a view of Meckel's cave?
Regarding cannula, initial time when we started in 2010, maybe way back, we used cannula that is used for insertion of stimulating lead in the spinal cord stimulator. But the problem with that needle was that very sharp. So we take advantage of this workshop and make it slightly blunt and use that. And initially, what we used to do is at the insertion point, we used to use that 11 size knife to make a skin incision, and later use that. ठीक है? But people have used that like in that Cook's microballoon compression set. What they have done is they have used needle, obturator, and sharp introduction. Initially, they use sharp introduction with needle to insert the skin, and later on, once the skin and supporting tissue appears, they replace that sharp stillate with obturator. That is blood tip. So that will not cause much more. And regarding what was the other question?
Sir, second part was that how do in AP view you check the position of your 14 gauge cannula?
APU is standard APU. Actually, the problem is that if you are using during procedure, what we do usually is neck is slightly extended.
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes we use some chest flow support also. So itself the position is slightly difficult. But if you are planning to do remove those flow and just flex the bone, slightly flex the neck, and aim is to bring that fattest part of temporal bone within the orbit. Then only you can see that sudden dip in the
true AP view
towards the buccal skin.
That's wonderful. So that you need to take a true AP view, in the line of the head position rather than in the line of table position. Thank you, sir. Another question is from Dr. Atta Abdullah. That have you ever faced facial palsy or nerve complication with these interventions, sir?
Facial palsy as such with this percutaneous Fromenauvel intervention, I not experienced. The facial palsy that is iatrogenic, especially if you are using the percutaneous individual nerve palsy by transcoronal approach, then patient can have facial palsy because while giving the injection at this point, you will block the facial palsy. Sometimes even ptosis can occur. So you have to aware while injecting using. Otherwise, as a complication side effect of percutaneous procedure, I not come out.
It is less likely to occur. Thank you, sir. Another, this is a comment for Dr. Siddharth Verma, who was asked about the Rastogi kit for balloon compression. Dr. Mohit Mahajan has informed that he has recently. So another question is, sir.
Yes.
From Dr. Amber Rawat. Few of our patients have presented with myofascial trigger points near the cannula insertion site. Have you had a similar experience in your practice, sir? If yes, is there any advice for that? Sir, he's asking about the making of trigger points near the insertion site of cannula.
I have never come across that.
Yeah, I also haven't come about it. So it is unfortunate thing, Dr. Amber, which has happened with you. There is no reason for which there should be a trigger point formation.
Muscle trauma can occur. Some patient may have, but in my clinical practice, our clinical practice, I don't experience.
Yes. Local trauma can be there, but it should be healed within few days. Sir, another question is, sir, what is your take on steroids after a radiofrequency ablation in trigeminal neuralgia?
The people are using it, but there is no, I think, as I know, there is no major advantage and there is no evidence of using steroids after ablation. Okay. If you use the steroid solution before ablation, that means you are separating the needle tip from the target neurons, target nerves volume. And if once the ablation has occurred, though ablation will take time, weeks, but people are using, they are using dexamethasone 2 milligram after intervention. But, as I know, there is no clinical evidence.
Thank you, sir. So there is no point in using steroid at least after the radiofrequency of gastric ganglion.
If people are using phenol also, they are using steroid. So that is multimodal approach.
Yes. Another question is, sir, that how many cycles of radiofrequency you do, and what is your measure of success to stop the RF endpoint of the radiofrequency?
Problem is that if you are using local anesthetic, then the the effect of local anesthetic will come, and it's difficult to understand. If you are not using local anesthetic, okay, the ideal, whether using local anesthetic or not, cycles are same. I usually start with 60 to 65 degree over a period of 60 seconds. After end of first session, first cycle, I usually check coronal reflex. And if I have to change the needle position, then again I will do the stimulation. Okay. And second will be, if we are keeping the needle on there, then second will be slightly further, like 65 to 60 seconds, or third will be 75 to 75 to 60 seconds. But for single nerve, usually 2 cycles are more than sufficient.
Okay. So the highest temperature you go, sir, is 75 degrees. Okay, that's great. Another question is from Dr. Yasser. Can we always start with block of peripheral branches at trigger point, or sometimes we should start with trigeminal? This is more of a statement than question. Another question is from Dr.
The literature shared the current recommendation, the treatment of choice, not treatment of choice, but one of the better choice for trigeminal neuralgia is RF. If you don't have facility of RF, you can go for peripheral nerve block, like this mandibular nerve, maxillary nerve, supracochlear. Just by the problem is that of the static pain after multiple procedures. Another is that they are very short lived. In fact, hardly lasts for 2 to 3 months. And that is, though none of the ablative procedures are definitive treatment, but they are far superior than individual. And it's an initial hiccup. As a pain patient, you can have while performing percutaneous coronal, but believe me, problem or complication are very rare. If you are sticking to your protocol or technique, then these problems are very rare. Unless God is not with you.
Yeah, that is true. Sir, another is a statement from BHU, our own place where the PDCC was conceptualized in pain medicine by Professor Rastogi sir, that it is also a statement that patients do respond differently between carbamazepine and oxcarbamazepine, because some of their patients have responded better with oxcarbamazepine when they did not respond well with carbamazepine.
Very true, very true.
Yeah, so different patient, different.
The beauty of carbamazepine, especially in our setup, is that it's easily available, very cost effective, very cheap, and very effective.
Yes, sir.
I still carbamazepine drug of choice for trigeminal neuralgia.
It is rather, if I can add, response to the carbamazepine is pathognomic of trigeminal neuralgia. You can make a diagnosis based upon the response to the carbamazepine. So that is the age-old drug, big Babaji of trigeminal neuralgia treatment.
Only problem is side effect. That's the problem.
Yes.
Especially long-term use.
Yeah, some patients there are side effects. They are unable to tolerate. So another question is, how about alcohol neurolysis? Have you ever? I have done in the trigeminal neuralgia patient. I have done it for the malignant patient with the trigeminal type of pain. What is your experience, sir? Alcohol neurolysis.
By percutaneous transdermal approach.
Yes, sir, yes. Supposedly, never done. Not a much experience, and I don't think that it is a preferable technique for the benign idiopathic or classical trigeminal neuralgia. It has been used.
Not for percutaneous, because percutaneous, the problem is that the spread of drug is, you never know. Phenol and alcohol, as I know that they rarely use or never use, mostly they use the glycerol.
Yes. Another question is, sir, is CSF dehydrogenase a must for needle placement confirmation?
No. If you are planning to do RF lasering, there is not mandatory to have egress of CSF from the needle. But people do say that pain patient, especially in personal communication, they have told me if you have, especially from west side, west of India, they say कि they go for egress of CSF, and they found the effect is dramatic. I mean, they have very effective neuroablation, but unfortunately they don't have any uh, publication or so it's a personal communication, but it's not mandatory.
Okay. Sir,
CSF is only important in glycerol.
okay.
Because unless you have CSF, so you can't do anything.
Yes, sir. Sir, one question is from my side. I am also in a learning phase. So this question is about the treatment of trigeminal neuropathy. What about that? Like, is there any intervention which works? Because none works in my hands.
We have to go according to neuropathic pain recommendation, management of
For the
neuropathy.
interventional part, sir.
International part, though, maximum, I think RF, glycerol doesn't have any role.
Mhm.
Neuromodulation may play a good role, but I have done one patient with percutaneous microvalve compression, and the effect was equivocal. I can't say it's very effective, but equivocal.
Okay. Actually, what happens, sir, with my hands that the neuralgia parts gets better, but the continuous neuropathic part doesn't respond very well.
Neuropathic access anywhere it's very difficult to treat.
Okay. So, thank you, sir. Thank you once again from the Indian Society of Pain Clinicians and from on behalf of myself as well as of the audience. It was a wonderful presentation by you, and you have patiently and elaborately answered all the questions. One last question, sir, it has just come into. Do you ever have to combine sphenopalatine and gastrin ganglion intervention for any patient?
Not combined. Sometimes if patient is refractory to, say, trigeminal user patient refractory to that, you can go for sympathetic block and sphenopalatine there, but only few patients or few are literature. I have done one patient, I think way back, I think 10 years back, but doesn't make any difference. Rather, we have done study in those patients, trigeminal user, we have done cervical sympathetic block. Those patients do have good pain relief. But sphenopalatine ganglion, not much experience as such.
Okay. Mhm. Thank you, sir, once again. And thank you, all of participants. Hope it was a useful session for you. I would like to again say a few words about the ISPC Gurukul. This is a free online educational unique initiative by the Indian Society of Pain Clinicians. This is a society by the pain physicians who are sincerely interested in the field of pain medicine and have done formal training in pain medicine or are doing. Also, it is focusing upon the residents of anesthesiology to help them understand the spectrum of pain medicine so that they can make better choice in their lives. Another good news for all of the pain physicians in India is the news that recently Medical Council of India, which is the authenticating body of Indian medical scene, has recognized the first and only 3 years pain medicine training perhaps in the world, which has started at our AIMS, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Rishikesh, been recognized by the MCI. So this is a great news for all of us people who are working and dedicated to the cause of pain medicine. Hope these things. And another news is that there is a notification of fellowship FNB course, 2 years super specialty course from the National Board of Diplomas, which is another accreditation body in India of medical sciences. So these two news are great news for the spectrum of pain medicine. So let's stay together. Let's help each other. Let's keep ourselves safe in these Corona COVID times. And I thank you once again. And with this, we are coming to the end of our this webinar. From next week, ISPC Online Gurukul will have a limited webinar series on the percutaneous spine endoscopy for the pain physicians in a language which is understandable to each and everybody of us. We will try to start from the scratch and will try to reach the sky. So see you again on next week at the same time on the same platform. Till then, keep yourself safe. Thank you very much and namaste to all. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.